Hey everybody, Jim the Tabletop Engineer here. This is going to be another paint and ramble. Today I'm going to be painting this guy. It looks like a rat in armor, sci-fi armor. He's got a sword and a laser pistol. This is what I'm using for a feral character in 5 Parsecs from Home solo game that I'm doing. So I'm going to paint this one up today. And what I wanted to talk to you about today is the subject of playing games solo. This is a real important one to me for a lot of reasons. And so what I want to talk about is, what are some of the advantages or some of the benefits of playing solo games versus what are some of the disadvantages. And I'll tell you, what successes I've had and what failures I've had. And then, of course, I welcome your comments in the video because I'm always curious to know what others are doing. So let me go ahead and get started. I'm going to paint this guy's fur brown initially, and then I'm going to lighten it with some lighter brown. What I wanted to share with you today basically has to deal with solo war games and solo RPGs. Now, I will tell you right off the bat, I do play a lot of solo board games. And I enjoy them, and I like the solo board games mainly because, you can play them anytime, anywhere. The rules are usually very specific, like, here's how you win, here's how you lose. I have quite a collection that I will be honest. I have collected so many board games over the years that have a solo play element. Some board games, especially in this day and age that are coming out after post-COVID, are designed from the ground up as solo games, and I'll talk about those too. But first thing I wanted to talk to you about was, why do I like solo games, or why do I play them? Well, it's not so much that I like them, although I do like them. It was sort of a necessity. I have 2 kids, ages 14 and 11. And they're good kids, and they have their own hobbies. I don't push my hobbies on them. I really never have. Now, I've introduced my hobbies to them just as like, hey, come play this game, or come check this out and let me know what you think. But they've gotten to an age now where they have their own hobbies. They've never enjoyed playing war games or role-playing games, although my youngest has never really given it a shot. Now, he did express interest recently in trying out a game of Dungeons and Dragons, so I'll take that. I'll take that, and we'll see if we can make that happen for him. But neither one of them are big board game players. Neither one of them are war game players at all. And so my wife isn't either. I mean, I knew this when I married her, that she was not into the same things I was. I definitely like the fact that my wife and I have different hobbies, that we have different interests. Believe it or not, my wife is a huge sports nut. I mean, she loves Braves baseball. She loves Alabama football. She likes sports. She grew up in a very sports-centric family, and I did not. My mom and dad, given a chance to watch a football game, a college football game on a Saturday, or to go do something with the kids, we went and did stuff. And I'm not saying the sports is bad, so please don't read any criticism into my comments here. It's just, this is the way I was raised. I was not raised in a sports-focused family. And for that reason, now, don't get me wrong, I can enjoy a good college football game. I'm not so much into pro football, but I do like college football. And I can enjoy it as much as the next person. But on a Saturday, if for instance, I went to Florida State, and they really suck right now. But if somebody calls me on a Saturday and there's a Florida State football game on, let's say it's a rivalry with Florida. Those are always fun to go to. If somebody calls me on a Saturday and I have the time and my kids aren't, wanting to do something, and my wife says, you can have the day to yourself. If a friend calls me up and says, hey, I want to play a war game, meet me at the game store, boom, I'm gone. Sports just does not, it doesn't rule my world. And so I just tell you this so you understand that I really like playing games, and always have, probably always will. And so the fact that my wife and kids really aren't into them, that can be a problem, when you want to play games and you don't have anybody to play with. So I have had to, for a really long time, I just dealt with it. I would pick up games when I could. When my boys were very young, we had D&D on Wednesday nights, and I was the DM for many years. But there were many times where I had to cancel at the last minute because my babysitter didn't show. My wife works unusual hours with her job, so sometimes she doesn't get home until late in the evening. And so, when I would go get the boys from school or what have you, and I've always worked from home, at least for the last 15 plus years, I think. I've worked from home. So, going and picking them up was all part of being a dad, and I enjoyed it. But when they got to a certain age, and I don't remember what that was, probably, 8, 9 for the oldest and a little younger for the youngest, I decided I wanted to get back into playing D&D. So my wife agreed. She's like, yeah, that's cool, but just, as long as the babysitter shows, which is a huge thing. So the babysitter would often, at the last minute, call me 20 minutes before I was supposed to head out the door or whatever and say, Mr. Kelly, I can't make it. And so I would have to call my gamers and say, guys, I'm going to need somebody to sub for me, or we'll just have to cancel. And I didn't have to do that a lot. I had a lot more gameplay showing up as a DM than I did not showing. But it was a problem, and I always felt bad about it. But now that my boys are older, or as they've gotten older and they could stay by themselves, I don't have to worry about the babysitter issue. We haven't had a babysitter in probably 2 years, but then COVID hit, and that kind of devastated the gaming world. And what I did there was I started looking at, I started looking at online for, how do you play games solo? Like, are there games that you can play solo? And, those of you who followed me any length of time, the answer to it. There are tons of solutions out there for people who want to play games solo. Board games I've already mentioned, but there are war games that are designed for solo play, or at least they have a solo play rule set. There are RPGs that have a solo rule set, and believe it or not, I've tested out quite a few of them. Many of them just didn't appeal to me. They were either too simplistic, and that may not be the best word, but they didn't scratch the itch that I needed for playing. Now, as a DM, I did do some DMing online during COVID, just testing games here and there, or playing some to just see how they worked out. But what I really played a bit of was I got into online wargaming just a little bit during COVID. And I got in and I got out because I just did not really enjoy it like I thought I would. There's a application out there called Tabletop Simulator. I got it off of Steam, but I think you can get it in other places. And really what Tabletop Simulator is, it's really designed for board games. You can play board games with people across the world, and a lot of game companies have created digital versions of their game, complete with tokens and dice and the board game itself, and they've imported it in so that when you get Tabletop Simulator, you can find these board games and play them online. And the mechanics are there. You can roll dice and you'll see them rolling, and you'll see the tokens move, or you move them and things like that. But there is I want to say it's a small subset, but at this point in time, it could be a very large subset. When I was testing it out, there was a small subset of wargamers who had started using Tabletop Simulator to play war games remotely. There's a whole bunch of Warhammer players. I say a whole bunch. I don't know the exact number, but I do know they're there because when I first joined up, you would find tons of terrain and miniatures that had a Warhammer slant to them. And, they were obviously designed by people who wanted to play Warhammer online. But I started playing a game briefly called Relic Blade. I played a few games of it online, and once again, I sort of discovered that it wasn't the same. I am very tactile in my game playing. I like to hold a miniature in my hand. I like to move it. I like to measure. And you get that sort of in the tabletop simulator type software, but not really. I mean, you're not moving a physical mini. The measurement is done for you with a tool. There's a tool that you can use to. Now you can actually drag the mini with your mouse and put it where you want. But I guess what I'm saying is it just lacked something that I wanted, and so I gave it up fairly quickly. I didn't really play too much of it, beyond maybe a handful of games. So where does that get me? So after that, I went back online and I started looking, because I had a feeling that there were other people out there like me that were looking for some ways to play solo war games, solo RPGs. Now, I'm very fortunate in that some of the war games I play, the creators, the writers, have created either standalone solo rules, or they've just included solo rules in the original game itself. And one of these is Frostgrave. When Frostgrave came out, it did not have solo rules. It was a player versus player, and all the scenarios and everything assumed that you had an opponent that you were playing with. There was an expansion, and honestly, I draw a blank right now. Joe McCullough, the author, after Frostgrave was released, he started releasing expansion books that had new scenarios, new soldier types, that kind of thing. And he released one. I want to say it was I'm not even going to say, because I'm going to get it wrong and somebody's going to slam me for it. But one of the books had rules for running solo games. And I took it out and I started playing it, and I really enjoyed it. Even though I didn't have an opponent to play with, I had that same feeling that you get when you play a war game. You were moving miniatures on a desktop or on a game mat, or you had terrain. You put terrain down. There was a little bit of strategy to it. Now, the strategy issue with solo games is often the one weakness. And so I mentioned that I would talk about advantages and disadvantages, and I'm probably going to jump back and forth, but one of the disadvantages, at least to me, is that with solo gameplay, the rules typically, they're not as smart as a human player. I mean, they're sort of like an algorithm. If creature X can see target Y, and target Y is within X distance, and target Y can be shot at without moving. You have to test these situations or these set steps, and it determines what the AI or what the artificial opponent is going to do. And some games are quite detailed in that, and some are not. And I go back and forth. A lot of times, the games that have very simplistic rules are often the most fun for various reasons. One, they typically move fast because you're not having to, the AI is so simplified, your target only has one or two or three choices to make. But then there are games where you've got quite a few things you've got to look into to see what's going to happen. With war games, I discovered that the games I played with opponents either had artificial intelligence rules for running an artificial opponent, or an expansion included them. But then there are games that are designed from the ground up. And I will get to RPGs, guys. I will start talking about, but right now I'm talking about war games. Some war games are designed from the ground up to be solo affairs. And I mentioned Joe McCullough, author of Frostgrave, because he released one that I played. I didn't play it a lot, but I do pull the game out every now and then. It's called Rangers of Shadow Deep. And for some, I just call it Rangers, but it was a war game designed to be played solo. You controlled a ranger, and he would have a certain number of hirelings or soldiers that followed him. And the rule book was really interesting in that it had like clues that if you reached a certain spot, you would obtain a clue. and you could roll on a random chart or consult in the back of the book. Like sometimes it had a number, and you would flip to the back of the book, and that number would have something that happened. It was sort of like a choose your own adventure style game, in the sense that there were rules for combat and movement and such like that, but then there was this element of unknown that Joe, the writer, had already created in the book, and some of it was rolled randomly, and some of it was, you, like I said, you consulted in the back of the book. But it's a very cool concept, and the game is very popular, and he's released, I think, at least 2 expansions to it. But that one was a really good example of a game that was designed to be solo. The more recent game that I've been playing, and you probably already know this, is a game called 5 Parsecs from Home. That's what I'm painting this miniature for. 5 Parsecs from Home is a science fiction game that you basically control a captain and a crew of a ship, and you go planet to planet, and you get missions, and you take on assignments and things like that, and you get enemies, you develop rivals that might track you down when you're on certain planets, and it's very, very fun. I've been really enjoying it. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be uploading a new series. I keep telling y'all the new series is coming. It just takes a lot of editing and a lot of filming. I'm going to be releasing that game, my gameplay, pretty soon here. But anyway, that's an example of a sci-fi war game that was, again, written to be solo played. The rules say you can play, with a friend. You can do it collaboratively. It's not in your best interest to fight one another, because you've got enemies on the table that are out to get both of you. So it is sort of cooperative in nature. I play it solo, mainly because it's relaxing to me. You roll what happens before you land on a planet, what happens to your ship, what happens to your crew while they're traveling in space. And then when you land, you roll some random charts to see what's going on this planet. Is there a war? Are there invaders? Is there can I find work on this planet, or are there enemies abounding that want me dead? It's pretty fun. You play a combat round, and then at the end of the combat round, you roll more random tables to see what happens. Did you find some loot? Did you get a new enemy? Did you get some more work? Did you find some special items, or make some contacts and things like that? It's really very cool, and I'm enjoying it again. So for the benefits, as I've already described what I enjoy about it, what I'll tell you that one of the drawbacks about it is it's very, I'm not going to say lonely, because that's not it. Unless you do like live sharing of videos like I plan on doing with it, it's basically, you don't share it with anybody. I mean, I guess you could get on Facebook or other places and you could post photos and tell about what you're doing, but it's not something that other players, unless you make a purpose of sharing it, no one knows you're playing it, right? It's fun, but ultimately, one of the reasons we play war games and we play RPGs is, at least for me, it's the social aspect. I mean, we like to be at a table with friends and strangers who will become friends, hopefully, and we play these games. And but anyway, now for RPGs, let me switch gears real quick. I've talked a lot about war games. Now with RPGs are a little bit different animal than war games, because RPGs are a little more open-ended. War games tend to have a set mission. You're supposed to do something, fight this enemy, or collect this item, or obtain this point of contention, contested space. With role-playing games, they are much more open in possibilities, right? I mean, there's so much that can happen. If a DM is truly running a game that is what's called a sandbox, and not railroading the players by putting them on a storyline where they can only go one direction and do one thing. If it's a true sandbox game, you can't predict what's going to happen next. And I think that's why a lot of people like RPGs, is there's this unexpected, unpredictable nature to it, this surprise element that we all enjoy. And in that case, that's, if you think about it, that's going to be hard to simulate in a solo game, right? I mean, you can have the most complex rule set for a solo RPG, but it's still going to be limited to what is in the rule set. It's not relying on a person's brain, the referee or the GM, who is coming up with, what happens next and what happens next and what happens next. And a referee, a GM, is making decisions on the fly. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're in favor of the player, and sometimes they're not. And a lot of times the decisions are made, based on gut instinct. The GM just evaluates, what's going on here. What they put themselves in that experience, and they ask themselves, what would really happen? Would that dragon really attack, or would the dragon just ignore? With solo RPGs, and I've played a few of them, you typically find that the limitation is the artificial intelligence part of it. You tend to see repeated things happen. And a prime example of this is I'm playing a game right now called 4 Against Darkness. It's a solo game. You take 4 characters, and I have a barbarian, a wizard, a thief, and a cleric. And you use the rules to generate this procedural dungeon. There's corridors, there's rooms, and then when you enter a room, you roll to see what's in that room. Is it a monster? Is it a trap? Is it something else? What I'm finding with the 4 Against Darkness is that it's a very fun game. I'm really enjoying it, but it is limiting in the sense that yesterday I played, or a couple days ago I played, and I entered 5 different rooms in that dungeon during that game time. And of those 5, I think 3 of them I kept encountering hobgoblins. Well, why is that? Because when I would enter a room, I would roll on a certain chart to determine what's in there. And one of the most common things to find in a room is a wandering creature called a minion or minions. And so when you do that, you roll on a table for minions. Well, the table for minions is a D6. So there's only 6 variations of creatures that are going to be in that room. And I just happened to roll, the same die for 5 different rooms, and I got 3 sets of hobgoblins. The writer could have gone with a D12, and you would have faced 12 different possible monsters, or a D20, or a D100. Now, a D100 is a bit extreme because the writer wants to get this out and publish it, and, to come up with 100 potential wandering monster scenarios when you roll just on that one table. That was just the minions table. There's special tables, there's boss tables, there's vermin tables. So, I understand why the writer, the creator, at some point you just got to say, okay, that's enough. And obviously this writer, and I don't remember the name, obviously they just said 6 is enough. And so in this dungeon crawl, if I'm going to continue to play it, and you do level up your characters, there's rules for leveling up your characters and gaining new spells for the wizard and gaining new abilities for the fighters and the thief and things like that. And then there's magic items that you can collect. And it has a lot of the RPG elements in it that you would find at a table, finding random treasure, finding random monsters, using miniatures. I use miniatures. You don't have to use miniatures in this game, but I like to use miniatures, and I do. And but again, one of the drawbacks to a solo RPG game like 4 Against Darkness is you're limited. You're limited because whatever's in the rule book, that is your limitations on where the game can go. Now, I will say this. One of the really cool things about this 4 Against Darkness game that I've discovered is that players of the game create their own custom scenarios. You follow the rules, but they'll have different charts that you consult for the rooms or for the monsters, the traps, and things like that. There are almost like modules, like old D&D modules that you can buy on Drive-Thru RPG that they'll say designed for levels, 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever. And you can play it. You typically can only play it once because it's designed to be a one-off. But I'm starting to collect a few of those because I can see wanting to play those. I'm really enjoying playing this game. I don't get to play RPGs very much. I'm typically the DM for my D&D games. But this allows me just a little bit of that RPG experience of taking 4 heroes into the dungeon and finding traps and finding treasure and fighting monsters and trying to get out so I can live again to enter another dungeon. It's very cool. And so when I discovered that they have these extra options for these one-off adventures, that really opened up the game quite a bit for me. So I definitely encourage you, if you're looking for a fantasy RPG solo experience, it's not a bad one to test out. You may find that there are some limits that you don't like. I mean, everything I've said is just me. I have my own opinion. You'll have yours. But again, I can encourage you to look it up and maybe download a PDF copy of the rule book and give it a try. And I'd be curious to know what you think of it. I have been watching very carefully. There's an RPG. Is it an RPG? Yeah, it is. There's an RPG out there that's being developed right now. There's a fantasy version and a sci-fi version. The fantasy one is called Iron Sworn. I always want to say Iron Sworn, like sword, but it's Iron Sworn. And it's out, and they're coming out with a sci-fi version called Star Sworn. And I backed the Kickstarter for Star Sworn, which allows me to look at the beta rules that they're releasing a little at a time. And I'm not quite sure how to explain it. It's sort of like the 5 parsecs from home. There's a lot of charts to consult and a lot of randomness to the game. But basically, I guess it is an RPG. I'll call it an RPG because you're telling a story. You're playing the game solo, and a lot of it, there's a GM aspect to it and a player aspect. And let me explain that. The GM aspect is basically the game, and I wish I could give you an example of this, and I'll think about how I can provide an example without giving away too much. But in the Star Sworn, which I've started reading the rule book. I have not done this for Iron Sworn, the fantasy version. But in Star Sworn, you create a single character that's going to go out into this universe and visit planets and take on jobs and things like that. And you roll on certain tables, and the tables will give you what I call a nudge. They'll just give you a nudge, and then it's up to you to fill in the story. It may say you encounter a wily merchant or and it'll give you a complication, like the merchant, is a known thief. But what you're supposed to be doing as you play this game, and I say play in quotes, as you play this game, what you're doing is you're telling the story. And a lot of people who are playing Ironsworn, as I understand it, are keeping a journal. Like there's it's time-based. So there's a whole set of rules about how time proceeds, and so they're using these journals to tell the story of this character. So there's a GM aspect in the sense that they're making up some of it, they're filling in the blanks. But then there's a player side of it, because there are times when you're going to roll dice or you're going to have to encounter opposition, and you don't know what's going to happen. The randomness of the game is going to take over. But what's an interesting part of it is, and this is where the game is really starting to get interesting to me, there's an artificial intelligence component of it, and they have a term for it, and I just went blank on it. But if you're not sure how to proceed with a certain scenario, there are tables in the back of the book that you roll randomly, and it's sort of like the decisions are going to be made for you, but they're not specific. They give you those nudges that I mentioned. I really wish I had the words to explain the game. I haven't played it yet, and I haven't read the rules completely, so I don't have the best understanding of how everything works. But I can tell you it's very interesting. It's a very interesting game to read the rule. I read a lot of rules. I think people who know me have heard me say this. I'll collect rules and I'll read them. I may never play a game, but I want to read the rules. I want to understand what's about that game because I might play it. And I have read a number of rule books thinking that I would never play this RPG or that war game. And after reading the rule book, I was like, holy cow, I've got to play this. And that was actually 5 parsecs from home. I had heard about how 5 parsecs was going to play, and I thought, I just want to get the rules and see how they're doing this because it sounded interesting. And then after I read the rule book, I was like, holy cow, I got to play this. This is just too cool. By the way, they just announced, Modifius just announced that they are going to be publishing the fantasy spinoff of that, or it's not a spinoff because I think it may have actually come first. These are rules that have been around for a while. It's not like this game was just all of a sudden created. Modifius has just decided to get involved and publish it in a more polished, formal book format. But they've got one coming out called 5 Leagues from the Borderlands, and it's going to be a fantasy take on the 5 parsecs type concept, where you roll to see what happens to your characters before they go into the dungeon or before they go on this quest. And then there will be a combat portion of it, I guess probably in the dungeon. And then after that, there'll be post rolls where you roll to see, what happens to cursed characters or injured characters or what have you. It's very interesting, and I think it may be more popular than 5 parsecs, only because I think fantasy RPGs and fantasy war games right now at least seem to be more popular. I know D&D is very popular right now, and I think a lot of players who discover D&D for the first time, who decide they want to start looking what else is out there, they tend to stay with the fantasy stuff for a while because it just feels safer. And they're more familiar with the terminologies or the creatures or the concepts. But again, if that's you, you're definitely going to want to pay some attention to this 5 Leagues from the Borderlands game. That's they haven't announced when it's going to be released. I think I read somewhere 2022, but I don't know. I could be wrong. I don't know where I'm getting that date from. But it is something I will definitely be looking into. No issues there. So I've got my feral painted, his fur, his gray suit. I've got some of the metals painted. Got his tail painted. I need to work on that belt, and I need to work on. I missed some spots now that I see. You always go back and you're like, oh great, I missed the leg there, missed inside there. And as always, I'll add my disclaimer. I am not a professional painter. I just want to get it on the table so that it looks fun and it fits with the style of the game. I'm not going for an award-winning paint job here, so just keep that in mind. So solo RPGs do exist, and I think we're going to start seeing more of them. I think that what COVID did was it gave a lot of game designers a lot of alone time. And game designers, especially during COVID, if they couldn't get out, if they couldn't beta test their games, a lot of them, I suspect, were looking at developing games that they could play themselves or at least test themselves while we were all quarantined in our homes. I don't know that for a fact, but I do know that all of a sudden you're starting to see a lot more solo rules on Kickstarter, solo games coming out that have a solo aspect of them. And I just think that's great. I don't think that there's anything wrong. Even once the COVID is ended and we're all back to our gaming stores and we're all enjoying ourselves, I think there will be many of us, myself included, who still want to play these solo games, because I've been playing solo for a long time, since my kids decided they don't like to play the games I like. So I definitely can see more of these type games coming out. Now, the question is, will they get popular? I don't know, because once COVID is over and we're all back to the game stores, I think there will probably be a decrease in the demand for games that have a solo aspect to them. And that may cause game creators to go back to, social games developments, games where they know the players are going to be in a group. And that's okay. I mean, most game developers are not doing this for free. They want to make a living at it. So they've got to write what sells, right? And if what is selling is not solo games, they're going to go back and they're going to start writing rules for groups. And so I say this only because if solo is something that you are considering, and let's talk about it. There's a lot of reasons. There's more reasons than just say having kids and or a spouse that don't enjoy playing in your hobby. I have quite a few gaming friends who live in very small towns. The smaller the town, the less likely there's going to be a game store. The less likely there are going to be other players who just so happen to like to play the type of game you do. Now, Dungeons & Dragons, you can probably always find, even in the smallest town, I suspect there are going to be Dungeons & Dragons players. They're out there. You may just have a hard time finding them, but they're there. But war games, specifically, can be very difficult for players who live in small towns, small areas, to find suitable opponents. And I hate that for you. I happen to live in Atlanta, where I can literally get on certain gaming Facebook pages and say, hey, I want to play a game of X, and usually within 10 minutes, maybe an hour, I'll usually have one or more potential opponents chiming in saying, I'm there, name a time, name a place. That is the advantage of living in a big city. But if you don't have access to that, solo games are definitely something you might want to look into. But if you have any kind of reasons behind not wanting to sit at a table with other people, online is definitely an option, but also solo games. I mean, they can't offer exactly what you're missing. You may not even be missing it. That may be the wrong word. If you may not know what it's like to play a war game in person or a role-playing game in person, but I can tell you that for me, the online experience is not the same as the in-person. But if you do not like to be out and about, it could be a good solution for you. Sorry, had to pause. Doorbell rang. So I've got the guy. He's almost done. I'm going to go ahead and paint his base black before I forget. I'm going to go with gray boots, but I wanted to base his boots in black. That's a horrible brush. Where was I? The whole, trying to find an opponent is I think it's a key reason a lot of players consider looking at solo games. Or at least if you're not aware of them, now you are, and maybe that's giving you some hope that you'll get some game time in. There are times when I just don't feel like playing a game. I feel like playing a game, but I don't want to deal with like getting all my stuff together and driving to the game store to set it up. Sometimes that happens when I've played way too much. There was a time not too long ago, I was just playing. It was almost like I was playing a Frostgrave game every weekend, and I just got to the point where I was like, okay, I need to take a break. I've been playing Frostgrave too much, and so I would come home but I wanted to play something not Frostgrave, and because I didn't want to go to the game store and I didn't want to do that, I was left with solo. So I have been playing quite a bit of solo games. No regrets, because again, I do enjoy them, and I think I will continue to play the solo games well after COVID's over, well into probably into my retirement years. All right, right now, that's about all I can do. I'm going to take a short break and let this paint dry. It is raining, so the paint is drying very, very slow. So I'm going to pause here, and I'll come back to finish this up, and we'll wrap up this discussion. All right, it's time to finish this guy up. He has a little bit of an overbite, a white bit on his teeth that I want to make sure to highlight because I just think it looks funny, or it makes him look like a rat, I guess. And I just want to put a little white on those teeth. I don't even know if you're going to be able to see it. Yeah, you can kind of see it. You can see where I've put his teeth right there. He has eyes. Now, I thought about red eyes, and then I said no, and now I'm thinking yes, I do want the red eyes again. I may regret this. The good thing about eyes is you can always go back and repaint them if you don't like what you did. So I'm going to use a little dot of red on them, just to. A rat's eyes. I've seen red eyes on rats, but I've also seen dark eyes. I want to do a little dab of red on there. I don't know. I may regret it. I tend to hold my breath when I'm doing eyes. Sorry. Oh, that does look good. Okay. This eye is sunk in a little bit. It's a little hard to get in there. Oh, that's perfect. Not too much. His nose, I want to paint that, put a little brown and black mixed just to get a darker nose on there. It's almost gray. I don't know if you'll be able to see that. I'll take, as I always do, I'll take photos and post them so you can see close-ups of this guy when he's done. Oh, I like that. The nose definitely sells it. All right. Next thing I want to do is add a little bit of just a little color to his belt. Maybe a green stripe somewhere. So I hope with these rambles, this is just my thoughts, my opinions. I don't proclaim to be the expert on anything. What I'm hoping is that something I said in the video maybe makes you think of something that you want to add as a comment. Maybe you have your own experience playing solo games, and if you do, I'd love to hear it. I'd like to know, what games you're playing, what your experiences are with solo RPGs or war games or both, whatever you feel you can contribute to the conversation. I definitely lean towards more solo war games, probably because I think they are the closest to their live opponent counterpart than RPGs are, if that makes sense. When I play a solo war game, that combat and movement against the opponent, it is almost identical to having a real opponent, except sometimes the decision making on the creatures or whatever, your enemy, may not be exactly what your opponent does. A human opponent can always throw curveballs at you. They can do strange tactics that you never thought of. Whereas a rule set that defines how your enemy behaves, a lot of times there's no surprises there, or there's very little real true strategic thinking. But again, with a war game, it comes closer to the real thing than, in my experience, the solo RPGs. The solo RPGs are fun. They just don't even come close to the real thing that you find with a live GM, for example, or other players. Your fellow players. You just don't get that with a solo RPG. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought as I look at this guy. I really like how it turned out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lighten his gloves and boots with a little dry brushing of some gray, just because the black is just way too much. So I need to get that gray that I had, which is right here. And dry brushing on something this small is probably going to be a little tricky, but I'm going to try. Just soak the brush really well right off, and then just sort of hit the, yeah, that's what I needed. Just a little bit of lightning there. And I haven't even added a wash yet to this guy. I'm probably going to add some washes in a minute. And the other thing I didn't do is I did not dry brush his fur with any kind of lighter brown, which I may not, you know what, I'm not going to do that till after I add the wash, because I think the wash will darken it a bit, and then I'll be able to lighten it up just a little bit. Yeah, I like that. He turned out decent. I can definitely use him on the table without feeling like he doesn't look good. He definitely turned out well. All right. Again, after I put the washes on, I'll take some photos and give you some close-ups of this guy. Thanks again for joining me. These paint and rambles, I don't know whether you like them. I like them just because while I'm painting, it makes the time go by quicker, and I seem to get things off my chest that I've been pondering. And I have been pondering solo play lately just because I've been doing quite a bit of it. So I hope this talk gave you something to think about, and maybe it gave you some ideas of some games you want to check out. It certainly, I'm very limited in what I was able to give you in terms of solo RPGs and solo war games. So that's where I reach out to you and ask you to add comments of those games that you're aware of that the rest of us may want to look into. All right, that's it for today. This is Jim, the Tabletop Engineer. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back next week with another Paint and Ramble. Everybody, take care.